My sister, who's a bridesmaid, demands to be the maid of honor instead of me at our other sister's wedding. I'm 26. My older sister, Laura, 28, asked me to be the maid of honor at her wedding, happening in a month. However, our younger stepsister, Carrie, 21, threw a tantrum. For context, Laura and I grew up with Mom without a dad for the first 5 years of my life. It was just the three of us until Mom met my stepdad. They married, and soon after, Mom gave birth to Carrie. My stepdad turned out to be a wonderful man. Before him, Laura, Mom, and I lived in a tiny apartment with little money, but we were happy because we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. Stepdad had a great job, so after their wedding and Carrie's birth, we moved into a big house that felt like a mansion compared to our old place. We started getting expensive Christmas and birthday gifts. Carrie grew up in comfort and abundance, and though Laura and I also enjoyed it, it didn't spoil us much. We remembered scrimping and making do with little. Mom still shops thriftily, and Laura and I love hitting secondhand stores or making things ourselves, like in the old days. So, in that sense, Laura and I differ greatly from Carrie. Carrie has always been spoiled, but not in the sense of throwing tantrums for a new car from Dad. She'd ask for a $500 birthday cake and get it, insisting on branded clothes, and if she didn't get something, she'd sulk for 3 days, walking around gloomy. Surprisingly, she still lives with Mom and Stepdad, has no job, and everyone seems fine with it. But that's beside the point. Last year, Laura's boyfriend of 6 years proposed, and we were all thrilled. He's a great guy, and we all love him. When Laura got engaged, she gave me, her friend Charlotte, and carried little boxes with pretty earrings labeled, "You'll be a bridesmaid." Mine said, "Maid of honor." We were ecstatic and started discussing colors, cakes, and such, but Laura and her fiancé decided to wait a year to save money and finalize details. 4 months ago, Laura announced she's pregnant, and the family was overjoyed, except Carrie, who stayed quiet and didn't say much. Laura explained she and Alan decided to marry in 2 months, inviting 30 to 40 people for a wedding before the baby's birth. Stepdad offered them $10,000 for their dream wedding, but given the circumstances, they asked to use most of it for a house they'd eyed, and he agreed. Charlotte, Laura, Mom, and I frantically prepared for the wedding. It was fun, except Carrie showed almost no interest from the start. When we discussed plans, she'd scroll on her phone or leave. Eventually, Laura talked to her and asked her to get more involved. Carrie agreed, but when we went to a one-price store to buy wedding decor, she scoffed, saying stuff from there was tacky. We ignored her and carried on. When we asked her to help make invitations by hand, she complained they'd look like kindergarten crafts and walked off. Recently, we went dress shopping. Laura said bridesmaids could pick any dress as long as it was blue, and we'd pay for them ourselves. Mom, Charlotte, and I found lovely blue maxi dresses at H&M, Mom's with lace, mine cotton with a floral pattern, and Laura's were perfect. Except for Carrie, who insisted on a $2,000 designer bridesmaid dress. Mom called it ridiculous, noting even Laura's wedding dress didn't cost that much. Naturally, Carrie pouted and whined until Mom caved. We went to a fancy bridal salon, where Carrie instantly found a soft pink dress she had to wear, costing $1,000. Mom refused, especially since it wasn't blue like the other bridesmaids' dresses. Carrie then declared blue was the stupidest color for bridesmaid dresses, since we don't live near an ocean. In the end, we left. Carrie sulked again, and Mom lectured her, explaining it's a budget backyard barbecue wedding for 30 to 40 guests, and she didn't need a $2,000 designer dress, no matter how pretty. A few days later, Carrie announced she found a blue dress in her closet. We were relieved, but when we visited our parents, she emerged in her old high school prom dress, a glittery, bejeweled ball gown she'd outgrown, with her chest practically spilling out, and she'd added a tiara encrusted with sparkling stones, which she claimed she bought specially for the wedding. Mom and Laura stayed silent, but I couldn't hold back and said it was ridiculous. Wearing a dress fancier than the bride's is over the top, let alone with a spilling chest and a crown. Who did she think she was? Carrie crossed her arms and declared, "I'm the maid of honor, so of course I'll wear a crown." Silence fell until Laura finally said, "I appointed Emmy maid of honor. You and Charlotte are just bridesmaids." This enraged Carrie, who started screaming, "What do you mean I'm not maid of honor? You said it was me when you gave us the gifts. I got earrings because I'm maid of honor." I don't know if Carrie genuinely thought she was maid of honor all year or just ignored reality, since I'd been maid of honor all this time and she'd said nothing until now. But it triggered her worst meltdown I've ever seen. I thought such scenes only happened in movies. It was the worst family outburst ever. Carrie screamed, cried, ripped off her crown, and stormed around until stepdad came to see what was happening. Through sobs, she told Laura her wedding was all wrong, claiming that $10,000 should have gone to a lavish wedding instead of that awful brick house Laura and Alan wanted. She also said marrying pregnant was the dumbest move, calling Laura that swan in a wedding dress, then ranted again about blue being a stupid color since we don't live by the ocean. By then, she was just making stuff up. Stepdad tried to calm her, but she yelled that if she wasn't maid of honor, no one would be, and she wouldn't attend the wedding. Laura was in despair, crying hysterically, and I was ready to smack that little witch so her crown stayed on the floor forever. Before I could, Laura said, "Fine, you can be maid of honor. You win." Carrie stopped crying, smirked slightly, and went to her room. Mom and Stepdad argued. Stepdad said nothing could be done about a 20-year-old's behavior, while Laura left to call Alan about possibly canceling the wedding. I was so angry, I stormed to Carrie's room and saw her ordering that hideous $2,000 pink dress on her laptop. I was floored by her audacity, said nothing, and left. Downstairs, Laura cried on the phone, parents yelled at each other, and Carrie happily spent money on nonsense because she got her way. I've never been so mad. It's a shame Laura lacks firmness. I'd have told Carrie not to bother showing up if she'd act like that. I don't know what to do now. It also stings that Laura so easily gave Carrie the maid of honor role just because she threw a fit. I don't know what to say or do. So let's pause this story and answer the author's question before moving to the update. Update. I want to share an update on what happened today. It's been 3 days since Carrie's meltdown, and I've spent that time reflecting and reading your advice. Early this morning, Alan, Laura's fiancé, called, asking if I could come to Laura because he's fed up with Carrie's antics and something needs to be done urgently. I felt relieved knowing I'm not the only one exhausted by this and rushed over. Laura was on the couch in pajamas, hair unwashed, looking like she'd been crying for days. Her state broke my heart. She apologized immediately, saying she didn't know what to do next. Alan suggested we three talk to Carrie, but Laura refused, saying she couldn't handle more screaming. I agreed screaming was the last thing Laura needed and proposed Alan, and I talked to Carrie alone, but Laura worried Carrie might feel ganged up on. After long discussions, Laura decided she wanted me to talk to Carrie alone, without Mom and Stepdad alongside Alan. Laura made a list of topics to cover so the conversation wouldn't veer off, e.g., explaining it's unacceptable to yell at a pregnant woman, harmful to the baby, how disrespectful it was to criticize the wedding, insult others, and, of course, use a tantrum to secure the maid of honor role. I also planned to discuss with Laura that Charlotte, the other bridesmaid, and I had planned a fun bachelorette sleepover in a few days. Laura's face lit up with joy. She was thrilled. I said it was meant to be a surprise, and Carrie was invited, but given circumstances, and since it's at my place, I no longer want her there unless she apologizes to me, Laura, and our parents for her outrageous behavior. She's not welcome in my or my fiancé's home. I asked Laura's thoughts, and she said it's totally fine, even suggesting inviting her other friend instead. I was cool with that, and headed to Mom and Stepdad's to see Carrie. As I entered, Mom asked why I was there. I said I needed to talk to Carrie. Mom glanced around, lowered her voice, and suggested I leave, saying the last 3 days since the outburst, Carrie had been happy, and no one wanted more drama. I apologized, but said nothing was remotely resolved. Just then, Carrie walked into the kitchen, asking what I was doing. Mom tried to smooth things over, saying, "Nothing. Emmy just came for something and is leaving." But I said, "No, that's not true. I'm here to talk to you alone about what happened days ago." Carrie looked displeased, and Mom's face turned red, but we went to her room. I immediately said it's unacceptable to raise her voice and scream at a pregnant woman as it could harm the baby. Carrie scoffed, saying, "No, that's not true. Don't make it up to guilt trip me." I asked what she meant by making it up, and she replied the baby wouldn't be affected just because she yelled, since it doesn't understand. "You're just making it all up." Honestly, this girl is unbearable. I decided arguing such nonsense was pointless and said whether Laura's pregnant or not, it's her wedding, not Carrie's, and all her insults and harsh criticism of decor were childish and unacceptable. I added that her tantrum to get her way was the height of immaturity, and if the roles were reversed, if I forced Laura to take the maid of honor role from Carrie, she'd lose it. So why does she think it's okay to do this to me? Carrie said I was being pathetic and jealous, adding there's no real issue. I'm just envious Laura chose her. I told Carrie that's untrue. Laura initially wanted me as maid of honor, or she wouldn't have asked, but agreed to make Carrie maid of honor to end the drama. Carrie smugly declared I couldn't do anything about it now and should just accept it. I said she's no longer invited to the bachelorette party, and Laura doesn't want her there until she apologizes to me, Laura, and our parents for her disgraceful behavior. She's not welcome in my or my fiancé's home. Suddenly, Mom burst into the room. I suspect she was eavesdropping, and exploded, saying I had no right to ban Carrie from the bachelorette or my house, and the only reason I was doing it was revenge. She said I was creating unnecessary drama. While at least Carrie didn't mean to hurt anyone a few days ago, I was doing it intentionally now. Carrie started crying, complaining I always humiliate her and treat her unfairly. Mom rushed to her, rubbing her back, saying, "I know, sweetie. She's being so harsh with you. You're not at fault." I noticed Stepdad in the doorway and asked, "Do you see this? Did she even mention buying that $2,000 pink dress?" He looked awkward, glancing between Mom, Carrie, and me, then said, "I think everyone's on edge now, and no one means what they say. Sisters fight, but I'm sure by the wedding's end, you'll be best friends again." I lost it. I told them all I was leaving. Mom stood and said the conversation wasn't over. I replied it was. If Carrie didn't apologize to me and Laura, I wouldn't speak to her. As I left, I heard Carrie say she had nothing to apologize for, but I kept walking. I was hurt and angry, with a splitting headache, so I drove to a nearby pharmacy. Now, about where I might have crossed a line, honestly, I'm not sure. In my previous post, I didn't mention, because it seemed unimportant, that Carrie has a boyfriend of about 6 months, Noah, 27. He's a devout Christian and generally a great guy. We met at community college 2 years ago, took many classes together, and became friends. He and Carrie have a lot in common. They both love animals. He often fosters them, and Carrie once considered becoming a vet. In early January, Noah returned to our town, got a job as a pharmacist, and they started dating. We were all happy because he's genuinely wonderful. Due to his Christian beliefs, he's eager to marry and have kids soon, often saying he hopes to propose by year's end. This is Carrie's first serious relationship, which might explain his rush to commit. So, I went to the pharmacy and was surprised to see Noah, not knowing he worked there. He waved, noticed the painkillers in my hand, and asked if I was sick. I said no, just a headache from wedding stress. He was surprised, saying, "Really?" Carrie never mentioned any stress. She said everything's going great. That surprised and angered me, so I asked if that meant she'd told him nothing about the situation days ago. He knew nothing, so I briefly recounted the key points: her insults, screaming, choosing her own dress against Laura's wishes, and now being maid of honor. Noah was stunned, asking, "Are you sure?" I know Carrie. She always hated yelling. She really caused such a scene? I said yes, sadly true, then suggested he recommend she see a psychologist. He knows many, and added she might even need meds for bipolar disorder, as I understand it. I told him I'm cutting her out of my life until she changes and that, in his shoes, I'd think twice before proposing. He stood silently, said nothing, and I left. When I got home, Alan and my fiancée were gaming. They asked what happened, and I told them. Alan and my fiancée thought I did the right thing, including warning Noah. Later that evening, I got endless messages from Carrie and Mom, furious I'd told Noah to stir conflict. I didn't reply and blocked their numbers for now. As for Noah, Carrie keeps him on a short leash, so I doubt he'll do anything drastic. He sees her sulky, spoiled side when she's upset but seems unbothered. Still, I felt I had to tell him. I wish I could say I feel better, but I feel pain and betrayal, like a lump in my throat and chest, and I don't know when it'll pass. Eventually, Laura called, saying she really wants me as her maid of honor, but, for family peace, chose Carrie for now. I'll swallow my pride and pain, support my beloved sister in whatever she decides, and adore my future niece or nephew. Thanks to everyone who listened. If you have more advice or wise words, I'm open to them. Final update. About 2 weeks have passed since my talk with Carrie. Since then, I've blocked Mom, Dad, and Carrie's numbers everywhere. I hope the situation settles on its own, but it hasn't really. Here's what happened. About 2 weeks after all this, my fiancé and I were watching TV late, around 2 a.m., when Carrie called him. He'd never blocked her or Mom's number, so we ignored it, not wanting to deal with whatever she might want to discuss at that hour. But she called again and left a voicemail begging my fiancé to answer because it was urgent. He called back, and all we could make out from Carrie's words was that something happened to Mom, and she didn't know what to do. We rushed over and met Carrie, who said Mom was hysterical, and she didn't know how to handle it. I asked where Stepdad was, and she said they'd had a big fight a few days ago, and he's now staying at a hotel. Carrie led us to Mom's room, and along the way, I noticed family photos in the hallway were on the floor or broken. When we entered, Mom was calmly watching a show. She turned to me and mumbled something like, "Is this my only daughter?" Her speech was so slurred it was hard to understand, and Carrie said to ignore her ramblings since Mom had been out of it for the last hour, saying nonsense. I thought she'd start yelling, but she just kept watching TV. I asked Carrie if Mom was drunk. She wasn't sure but knew Mom had drunk some wine earlier. Turns out, Mom had been saying weird, nonsensical things, then started screaming about a broken family stuck in photos, explaining the hallway mess. While I questioned Carrie, my fiancé called an ambulance. He asked if Mom took any meds, and Carrie said she takes something for anxiety and depression, which I didn't know. After he finished the call, Carrie went for Mom's pill bottles to bring to the hospital, and my fiancée tried reaching stepdad. I asked Carrie if she'd contacted our other sister, and she said no, not wanting to stress her and the baby. Then she admitted she'd always known I was right about stress affecting pregnancy, but didn't want to admit it. I decided now wasn't the time to argue and stayed quiet. Soon, paramedics arrived, and as they entered, Mom started hysterically screaming again, mumbling incoherently. I couldn't catch it. She said something about needing to stay to feed a child. We all went to the hospital, and eventually my fiancé reached stepdad, who arrived much later. The doctor suggested Mom had a breakdown due to stress, constant fights with stepdad, and mixing alcohol with meds. That night, she drank quite a bit, causing disorientation. He also thinks she misused her medication. Physically, she's fine, but they kept her for a few days under observation. Due to pandemic rules, I can't visit or see her until discharge, but stepdad managed to check on her, though he can't stay long and only saw her that first night. As for the wedding, while Carrie and I drove home, she told me Laura texted her days ago, saying I'm still maid of honor, the decision is final, and she won't respond to calls or messages from parents or Carrie about it. I was shocked, especially since Laura hadn't told me. I tried to learn more, but Carrie was mostly silent, though she gave a little speech about maybe never considering me her sister again, since she feels betrayed. I just listened, too tired to argue or act. She said nothing more about the wedding or Mom's breakdown, and I haven't spoken to her since. I'm looking for a family therapist to address our conflicts soon and plan to contact Mom's doctor for recommendations. I told Alan what happened and hope he can tell Laura without adding stress, suggesting he be careful with words and just say Mom's okay. It started with wedding planning, but I think we had underlying issues that just escalated. If you have questions, I'll try to answer. Everything's been a blur, so I might have missed details. Another update. So Laura had her wedding. It was at our family farm with about 50 guests. Carrie wore that pink dress she chose because Laura caved, complete with a tiara from her prom. A few days before, Carrie posted on Facebook, addressing me, saying stuff like, "I can't believe my own family can be so toxic and bully me." I just blocked her. Honestly, nothing too outrageous happened at the wedding. Carrie got drunk, tried singing, dancing, and seeking attention, of course, but nothing extraordinary. She ignored me completely. If I entered a room, she'd loudly declare she couldn't be near, negative energy, and leave, dragging her boyfriend along. Her boyfriend proposed and messaged me, asking if I could reconcile with her and help plan their wedding. I said I'm sorry, still want to be his friend, but can't continue with her. He said he's sorry, and hopes we'll reconcile someday. I haven't spoken to Carrie in months. Laura's fine, and still keeps in touch with Carrie. Mom and stepdad are silent, and I'm keeping my distance. I've unfriended them all on Facebook, but Laura keeps me updated. Nothing special has happened since. Not the most exciting update, but thanks for the support. Edited for those saying I shouldn't have mentioned Carrie might have bipolar disorder. You're probably right. I meant no harm. A close friend has bipolar disorder, recently started meds, and I noticed similar outbursts in Carrie. He suggested she might have it too. I told Noah because, given his medical background, I thought he might have info or convince her to seek help. I don't judge those with bipolar disorder and don't claim to be a victim or 100% innocent. I've had my disputes with Carrie before and during this, so I know I contributed. I usually try to avoid her outbursts or Mom's.